How's it going, guys? Kris here with another weapon versus for Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. And today we're going to be taking a good look at the MP5 alongside the Milano 821. Two of the first submachine guns you'll be able to unlock in the game's multiplayer. Despite belonging to the same gun category, they're both going to perform in very different ways and they're both going to suit different playstyles, with each weapon having distinct characteristics and attributes that are going to make them feel quite individual in comparison to each other. Submachine guns are generally best used within shorter sightlines alongside aggressive tactics, but both the MP5 and Milano are still going to offer their own pros and cons, with the two guns being able to do some things better and other things worse. And it's these kind of things that we're going to be focusing on in this video, and seeing just how the two guns compare, looking at the in-game stats and conducting a few side-by-side tests. So first and foremost, let's see just how dangerous those guns are going to be. Against a close range target, the Milano is going to be able to take them down in one less bullet than the MP5, with it taking just 4 bullets instead of 5, giving it the more powerful shot in CQC. This extra power also comes in useful against longer range targets too, as this next test shows us that the Milano 821 can take down its victim in 6 shots, whereas the MP5 is going to get the job done in 7, generally giving the Milano a higher power output over all ranges, making its bullets deadlier when they connect with your opponent. Because these guns are both designed to be used a bit closer to the fight, it makes sense to run a close range headshot test too, which pretty much reflects the other tests, allowing the Milano 821 to kill once again in 1 less bullet than the MP5, thus reducing the shots needed to kill by 1 for both weapons. So when it comes down to damage, it's obvious who's the king, with the in-game stats telling us that the MP5 dishes out a maximum of 32 damage, and the Milano 821 packs more of a punch, with its rounds dealing 10 damage more, at 42 within shorter ranges, ultimately letting it take down players in less shots over all distances. Which is kinda weird in the sense that in reality, both guns are typically chambered for the 9mm Parabellum cartridge, but I guess we'll roll with it for the sake of balance. Of course, if we get attachments involved, the base damage for both guns can be increased a little bit with the Task Force barrel, but that's not going to allow you to kill any quicker within shorter sightlines, as it's mainly going to help you finish weakened targets off and extend the gun's range, perhaps lowering the number of shots needed to kill over a specific distance, which is kinda what some of the other barrels can do effectively too. All of this damage information we've talked about so far is balanced by the fact that the MP5 shoots at a noticeably quicker speed of 857 RPM, making it more of a spray and pray option for spamming shots out quickly in CQC. Whereas the Milano 821 likes to drop it down a notch and take its time, firing at a much steadier speed of 576 RPM, one of the slower rates in the SMG category, which might not seem quite as vicious in close quarters, putting a bit more pressure on you to land your shots here, but still rewarding you quite nicely if you do, with it being able to knock off larger chunks of health, having those heavier damage values. With all that said though, despite the Milano killing in less shots, the MP5 is often going to come out on top, at least in closer distances, where targets are going to be much easier to hit, with it having slightly faster kill times, therefore potentially making the MP5 the deadlier option overall, with that added speed advantage. The MP5 also holds on to its maximum damage for a teeny bit further, with it starting to drop off at about 15 meters instead of 13, so this might just make one of those range extending attachments seem a bit more inviting when you're running with the Milano, which will probably make it seem like a more viable gun to use for medium ranges, while still performing adequately, but perhaps not quite as effectively as the MP5 in a close range situation. Anyway, those damage stats don't mean anything if you can't get your bullets to land on target. Our next tests are going to be looking at the gun's accuracy and recoil patterns, starting off with the MP5. As we fire at this wall, we can clearly see that the MP5 is going to drift upwards quite quickly, but not really straight to a specific side, with it slightly leaning to the right a tiny bit during the first few shots, but generally skipping around from left and right in a fairly random way afterwards, with most of the recoil being forced vertically. If we switch over to the Milano 821 and run the same test, we can see that it's also going to kick upwards a fair bit. Maybe not quite as fast as the MP5 due to its slower fire rate, but the gun's actually going to be drawing a bit of a backward C shape, arcing to the right before returning to the centre, which then heavily drifts over to the right after burning through about half of the magazine's rounds, giving it a pretty strange but predictable recoil pattern overall. Putting the two guns side by side, despite the Milano clearly having the higher recoil numbers in the stat list, the MP5's pattern will often seem to be a bit more erratic and difficult to control, due to its recoil stacking up quicker with its faster fire rate. The Milano's recoil pattern might seem a bit awkward, mainly drifting over to the right, but its bullet groupings are generally tighter and closer together, giving it a higher degree of accuracy, thus letting it perform a bit more effectively against targets further away, probably down to that steadier fire rate offsetting those higher recoil values. So this further enforces the MP5's role in the game, at least in comparison to the Milano, being a weapon that's better optimised for close quarter engagements that might struggle to take down players over mid to long distances, at least without the right attachments, that is. If you want to extend the MP5's effectiveness over range, then you're pretty much gonna have to lower those recoil values with muzzles and grips, like say for instance the field agent grip, sacrificing some of the gun's mobility in close quarters to make it easier to stay on target with when firing. The Milano is also going to benefit from similar attachments, but probably not quite as much, with it already feeling a bit steadier than the MP5 against players further away. With all that said, the Milano still isn't exactly a weapon designed to be used against players over long ranges, because although its recoil might seem a tad easier to manage at times, its ballistics definitely aren't the best. Both of these guns' bullets are subjected to a lot of resistance as they fly through the air, travelling quite slowly and dropping quite quickly. But with the MP5 having a slightly higher muzzle velocity of 250 meters per second, as opposed to the Milano's 225 meters per second speed, this gives it slightly faster bullets that won't drop down quite as much. You'll still sometimes need to aim above your enemy's head, which we can see in this test by aiming at the same place with both guns and firing a shot off, as the Milano's shot lands a little bit further down on the frame ahead. So for this reason, the Milano might benefit more from barrel extenders to increase velocity, making it more versatile against players over a wider set of ranges, which will probably go hand in hand with its stronger power over distance too. It's also worth pointing out that the MP5 will probably benefit more from having a laser sight attached to tighten up its hipfire spread, which will help it out even more so within its optimal engagement range in CQC. The Milano's got a tighter base hip spread than the MP5, so therefore you probably won't need to prioritise a laser sight when using the Milano, freeing up a slot for another attachment instead. So next we're gonna run a few reload tests, with the first being those tacticals. In-game stats tell us that the MP5's got the slower tactical reloads, taking 2.6 seconds to perform, rather than 2.2. This test pretty much verifies this, as we can clearly see that the Milano is going to swap those mags over at a quicker rate, which is going to help you get back into the fight a tad faster as a result. But what about those empty reloads when there's no bullets left over in the magazine? Well, if we do a similar test and fire off the last round in the guns at the same time, we get a very similar story, with the Milano beating the MP5 in the race, therefore making it the more reliable option when you run out of shots and need to switch over those mags. The Milano holds 2 rounds more than the MP5, fires at a steadier, more controllable pace, kills in less bullets, and reloads slightly quicker too. So it's pretty obvious which is the most reliable gun out of these two, with the Milano hands down beating the MP5 when it comes to dependability and ammo management. The Milano can take down more players per magazine, and less rounds are going to be wasted in the process, due to it not shooting very fast and not spewing its bullets all over the place like the MP5, resulting in it running out of ammo more often, sometimes leaving you in an awkward spot, having to rely on your sidearm to finish someone off. For this reason, I'd probably recommend magazine attachments to either increase the MP5's ammo capacity, or to at least speed up those mag swaps, that are likely going to cause you more problems than they would if you were using the Milano. As a last factor to give the Milano an extra point towards mobility, it's also got a slightly quicker aim down sight speed too, which is a very nice little bonus. So anyway, as a quick summary, we've learned that the MP5 is generally going to be a more aggressive gung-ho option, mainly prioritising speed over most other things, whereas the Milano 821 is a slower but deadlier option that might not be able to shred through players like butter quite so easily up close, but can generally be a bit more reliable and useful against players slightly further away. Both of these SMGs offer you their own distinct traits, but with the right attachments you can amplify their good stats and tone down some of their bad ones. But it's safe to say that if you want to optimise close range lethality, then the MP5 is usually going to be the better pick, being able to tear people apart up close much easier, without having to worry too much if a bullet or two strays off target as you pepper shots out at a less controllable but much more spammy rate, with the MP5 acting more like a close quarter bullet hose. You might need to tap and burst your shots into smaller groupings if you want to stay on target against someone further away, or just try and get closer to your targets before letting them have it. The Milano will probably fare a little bit better in these situations, whilst also being able to keep you in the fight a bit easier too, with its snappier reloads, along with its stronger reliability and mobility stats. This as an overall package generally makes it a slightly less dangerous but much more versatile weapon than the MP5, allowing it to perform better in certain situations over others. But generally speaking, both of these guns are SMGs at the end of the day, so you're probably best using them within short to mid ranges, along with some fairly offensive tactics. So that's pretty much it for this one, folks. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give me a like if you did, and subscribe if you want to see more. Make sure to apply all notifications if you want to be the first to see new content. And of course, thanks for watching. And I'll be seeing you in that next episode.